Foss,
Present.
Frank Foster. So Hughes here, Nikki Cadillac. Steve Mahoney.
Here.
Russell Minor,
Here.
Jess. Yeah. Jack, not here yet, you are like, here. Chris, not here yet. Anthony, okay, great. So, I'm glad you all, read the email that you're coming over here. I was wondering how many people would actually miss that, if you could tell, if it's like in red, big letters, and sent it twice to make sure everybody got it. So we're gonna jump right into it. First of all, is there any public comment? Sally, anything you see?
No, no one has jumped in
Okay.
to raise their hand.
Okay, seeing nothing, we will move on to the next item. I'm hoping everybody got a chance to look at the minutes from the last meeting. First, I guess I'll ask if there are any comments, suggestions, any changes that you want to propose we make. If they're perfect, then we have a motion to approve them.
Motion to approve the meeting minutes of July 8th, 2021.
Second.
Second. Just a technical question. I was not there.
Yeah.
But I watched the meeting. It seemed accurate to me.
then we
Mind
can.
if I vote yes?
Okay, that'd be awesome. Okay. All right, so,
Do we have someone virtually?
Oh.
It's on, when you see the analysts.
okay. Okay, all those in favor? Those opposed? All right, it passes. Thank you very much. Welcome, Jack. It's nice to have you here. Okay, next item on the agenda is kind of the administrative stuff, and let's see if I can make this. Which do I click? Oh, okay. Okay, first, actually, I'm gonna go back one. How do you go back one? I need the back slide.
Back arrow.
Thank you. Okay, as to administrative update. First of all, I want to start off on a positive note. I want to congratulate the 8 members of our committee who swore in and signed their papers with Jennifer Cruz. So thank you very much. For those of you who haven't, there are 3 of you. If you could please do so as soon as possible, that would be great. And we do need to make sure that that gets done. If anybody has any issues or difficulties in doing that, let me know. And Jennifer, she'll be pretty flexible. So if you need some, work or whatever, get some way of that, let me know. Second is, as we all know, that we're a committee kind of from very different backgrounds and talents. We've got people who come from different occupations. We've got lawyer here, we've got business people, we've got software engineers, we've got other people who have worked in the corporate environment, people who've got a lot of experience in government, and some people with no experience in government. So I think it's really important. We're going to be tackling things as we go. It's going to be a really working committee that everybody should try to hear. If you can't be here in person, be here on remotely. Excuse me, because we really need to hear everybody's perspective. We're going to be discussing. So you can be here. That would be. Jack, I'm gonna have to put on mute. Would you guys join?
No, that was captured.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you. So anyhow, if you miss a meeting, please try not to, because we really need your participation. But if you have to, because God knows we all have a life outside this room, just try to catch up on the reporting, because we don't want to go backwards. If there's something that happens or comments that you made or questions that you have about the meeting when you're looking at it, let Jess or me know. And we'll fill you in on the details so that we can just keep moving. If there's something really important we need to come back at, as Pat and Anthony are gonna tell us, is like once we discuss something, it's not over forever. We will be coming back to some things. So if it's something we need to put on the parking lot to come back and visit later, I want to make sure we capture it. So, yeah, thank you. That's okay. So that's pretty much it for the administrative stuff. So the first order of business.
Question.
Yeah.
In that spirit, are we gonna be on Tuesdays moving forward, or is it unclear?
No, it's clear. Every second and fourth Tuesday of every month.
Okay, great.
So that's what we decided. If it gets to be a problem, but it appears that it works for most people. So that's the plan. If it becomes a problem for anybody, you should let me know, and we'll figure out how to make that work. Yes, so one of the things that we're gonna do today, before we get down into the detail, the nuts and bolts of all of this, is that we're going to, we mentioned at the very beginning, when I was talking about the structure of this committee, that we're gonna have subcommittees. And the subcommittees are gonna take specific things and they're gonna do a deep dive, come back with reports for whatever it is to this committee, and then we make the ultimate decisions. The subcommittees also might actually go off and actually do some activities that the larger community might not do. And just to let you know, we're looking for our first two in this meeting. The first is external communications, and this is, I've said phase one, because I suspect that there's going to be different parts to external communications. But right now, we've talked about our charge is to make this process as transparent as possible to the community and to the town. So, and this could be web pages, it could be Facebook or other social media stuff, it could be, I put quotes in newspaper because I don't know if you follow when it's electronic. But you all know what I mean, Buzz. And then maybe it's interactive somewhat, I don't know. Those are just things that, this group would tackle.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Is this to create communication strategy? Is it to implement the strategy?
I'm glad you asked. I'm glad you asked. So let me, the second committee, before I commit to anything, is stakeholder input, because I think it's really important that we tap into those who work in town government now or have, and maybe through surveys, interviews, focus groups, or whatever. So we get a sense of what seems to be working well, what doesn't, and maybe some of their suggestions for things that could improve. This could include committees and boards, et cetera. Now, one might ask, what is it that this committee is going to do? And that,
Things.
oh yeah, sure.
Down there.
Huh?
Or just.
Okay, I'm gonna leave it. I can't hit it there. It's jumping over that thing. Anyhow, so what you'll be asked to do if you want to join one of these groups is to develop a strategy, tactics, timeframes, deliverables, and resources you need, because it could be that there's an external resource. So, for example, if it's a survey, you may need a resource to do the analysis or a tool, that sort of thing. And then the group would go off and put that together, and then present recommendations at the meeting at the end of August. See, that's August 26th. Not doing this stuff, but go up, brainstorm it, figure out what it would look like and how you might want to do it, and then come back to the larger group and with what the plan might look like, and so that we have a sense of it, and then we can start talking about how we implement the plan once we get there, but we don't know what we're doing until we understand what the components might be. So what I'm looking for today are volunteers for each of those committees. And those committees will go off and do their own thing and then come back and report back. So external, and one other thing is that Sally, because once again, generously volunteered to be a resource. She's already put together a Facebook page. And, it maybe you want to change it, tweak it, maybe some additions. I'm not sure what, but, she's agreed to help out on that communications group, so as a resource. And Patrick has been doing work on the town website, and he's already established a place for our committee. He also is the one who's established the Google Drive for our use. So the documents are up on Google Drive for those of you who find working Google Drives helpful. So anyhow, those are two resources that will be available. So are there any takers, anybody interested in communications? Oh, Russ?
Volunteers not.
Okay, communication, great. Okay, great. The next one is the stakeholder info. Looking for volunteers for that.
Stakeholder input into what?
Well, we're gonna have to put together some questions, like what is it we want to know from people who are, and maybe it could be as simple as, we're gonna ask 3 questions. What's working well from your perspective, what's not working so well, and what suggestions do you have to make what's not working well work? It could be as simple as that.
We just thought this week was just putting together questions to be asked.
Questions to be asked, and then a plan, like, is it gonna be one-on-one interviews? Is it gonna be a survey? If it's a survey, how do you want that to look? Is it gonna be focus groups? There are a number of options that you could, and maybe there's some I haven't thought of, but that would be my top of all thought.
So we all went through a survey, I think, I would
That,
go for that.
this is only of the employee group. Now, eventually, we're gonna do it like a town survey. This is not that. This is like the first round of getting feedback into us by people who are intimately involved in how the government is running. And, they say that most times the people who understand the problems the best are the people who are actually doing the job at all levels. And so it's kind of coming at it from that perspective. And you probably get some good ideas as to what can make things more efficient or more effective or whatever.
I believe it's only the answer depends upon the quality of the question. We'll do that. I will often be part of that.
Okay.
It's the quality of the answer, that's from the quality of the question.
Okay.
Also volunteer.
Okay, for it, great. I also am going to volunteer for that one.
Question, will that be present employees or past employees or both?
That's part of what we're going to decide. I would suspect
It'd be a great recommendation from the committee.
it would be, yeah. Okay,
It'd be very interesting to see past.
yeah, especially since we've got CBD. Yeah. Okay, so we have 2 committees. Thank you very much for people who are volunteered, and I'm gonna leave it to each committee to pull themselves together. So maybe after tonight, you can regroup just briefly to talk about how you want to make that happen. You know, Zoom or however you guys figure it out as to what you think the best way is to do it.
And if anyone regrets not volunteering, I'm sure, someone barrier.
What's the total number that we can have to not violate open meeting law?
Quorum.
And we have what, 8 people?
Yeah,
So
so we have
four
3.
and 5, so we can have 4, right? Yeah.
And we have 3 on each, so we don't have to worry about that.
Get space.
Okay.
Right, is it 8 of us?
Oh, there was 9.
Wait a minute, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8 voting members.
9.
1, 2,
So
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 4 and a half.
So 5 would be 4.
Yeah.
So we can have 1.
Okay, so I have Nikki, Russell, and Jess, and Jack, Corey, and me. That, there we go. And now it's all you. Bring you the art.
Get that?
And what about the?
Hold up.
No, you just all you need, all you need is the mouse.
You know, Is that already included? Okay.
Yeah. When do you want first?
I don't know where they're located. Patrick?
He's gone back to.
Yep, so all of the, I can pull it up if you can't find it, but they all should be there. What are you looking for, Pat? The memo or the presentation?
Let's start with the memo.
Son,
Now, that's the presentation. That'll be.
where's the memo?
there
Oh,
should be-
so, Jess, if you look at, Edge or Internet Explorer, both the PDF should be in there.
Start there.
Okay, hold on, I just stopped sharing, shared.
I can always pull it up if you,
See
oh, there
that
you go.
now?
Yep, there you go.
There you go.
Wonderful. Yeah. When we met last time, we talked a little bit about what's working and where you might have some challenge. And this memo was sent home to you, so we're not gonna spend a lot of time on this, but I wanted to make sure we didn't need these. So, Christine, I'm actually, it's gonna be tricky. We figured this out. Okay, so the first question we asked is what's working well within Burlington town government? The themes that I was hearing, town meeting, in general, well-informed and active, having 3 meetings has been great. We also heard about excellent local services, including veterans, recreation, emergency services, all serving the residents well. We talked about an increasingly proactive government, with some examples of, concerted effort on the part of boards to really problem solve and efficiently solve problems. We also heard about some increasing efforts in economic development and planning to respond to the new business outlook of Burlington. So we heard that elections are well run and transparent. There was some good feedback about voters are giving us good information about candidates compared to some other towns. And having local media, virtual and hybrid meetings has increased public engagement. So we're just going to get through these, but I wanted to find out, even for people who weren't here last time, are there any other themes that we've missed? Major themes of course, Burlington's a wonderful place to live and work. Did we miss any major themes of what we like most about? You all had a chance to answer last time, so let's, some of the areas that we heard needed some improvement, civic engagement, for example, level of participation in elections and attendance at town meetings. There was some thoughts they were looking for in the education of the public in the form and substance of government. And ensuring that Burlington residents have the access to services and are encouraged to participate in boards and committees. We've heard about the communication of town services, including website design and how to look for assistance, might pose some challenges. And we talked about, with respect to staffing and local government officials, we heard that there was a desire for more training and mentoring of staff, volunteers, and officials. Additional succession planning, concerns about siloing of departments, boards, and committees, and interest in there being more consistency of reporting structure and policies among the different departments, and the ability to attract and hire candidates for positions. So that's kind of an overview of some of the answers you gave. I'm wondering if, now that you've had a chance to think about it for another week, are there any major themes?
I think one was the silos. Living in silos, I think that's it.
Yeah, and that's the third bullet, the siloing of departments, boards, and committees.
Yeah, okay.
So, I don't know if it needs improvement, but the thing I'd like to add that I thought about recently was also, and I know we'll dig into it, like why it happens, but the 90-day advance of town meeting for zoning, I think it puts a lot of burden and stress on some of the boards and just the overall process.
So that's for articles, submission of articles for town meeting.
With the zoning,
Yeah, we present.
I'm not thinking that the state,
Huh?
you know, this purposes is like the state requirement.
Definitely not.
That,
That's what I was told. I don't.
that,
know. We'll find it
it
out.
used to be 45,
But notices that require that conditions.
I think it's a combination of process and how involved it is on our end, plus some of the timing things, but I don't think it's just the timing of the state that's driving it. It might be all,
Notice and all that stuff.
yeah, it might be like a function of all of the steps within our
Yeah, so I think 45 days is the state requirement.
But the 90 days was an attempt to give more time for people to see.
Oh, not walk in and read that? So,
It's more time to get it out there as it's more or less final format for people to see and comment. So there's time to then adjust for town meeting. The thought process were that 45 days provides sufficient time.
so I think looking at the process of that, because I think over time that is morphed into final version has to be done by 90 days before you can't make any changes. So I think we need to just take a look at the process there.
Except with the moderator, as zoning.
That will absolutely be a part of our discussion.
Because I think how we do it, Facebook, we see it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one,
Final form.
yeah, and I think this is something that we can't solve right now. So why don't we put this, we've got to capture it here, Russell, I think.
Just gonna note, maybe it's worth the thing, sort of meta to observe here is the rationale behind some decisions or rules or things like that. Maybe that's useful to make sure we capture that in the language of the charter and the language of the rules and things to help, so that people who look at it 20 years from now, say, why did they do that?
Yeah. Yeah, because to one of the bullets up here too, the documentation in historical information completely lacks. And so some way to properly document a lot of the decisions and drivers.
So these are some of the things that we'll be carrying with us as we have our discussions along the way throughout this process. Not the only things, we will be developing additional themes as we go along, once we have additional public input. But some of the broad themes, like civic engagement, communication, will carry us through, and we'll try to look back and revisit and make sure that we are hitting on items that we go through. So that's all I have on this one. And so, thank you for putting that up so. The next thing we want to talk about, is that we put together, some what we call example towns for study. Now, I didn't say comparable towns because there are not going to be any perfect, perfect twins, Burlington that we're going to take a look at. But in general, these towns that we've chosen are representative town meetings with a population in the range of Burlington between about 22,000 and 30,000. And I think you'll notice the populations that we have in this chart are based on a fixed time where we could get from the Census Bureau for all of the towns. So I think Burlington may have contracted a bit. Some of the other towns may have enlarged. I think this is 2024 through our census, what we found at their site. But generally in this range, generally a suburban character in eastern Massachusetts, we didn't look too far afield. Most 5 of the 6 operate under a home rule or special act town charter. We did include Milford, which operates under a combination of special acts and bylaws, just like Burlington. To take a look at that, about the different ways of operating. These are some of the towns we will be using, when we look for a charter language. However, we will definitely be going out, these aren't the only towns we will look at. We may find an issue that we need to go outside this town, it might be appropriate to look at language from other charters, it might be appropriate to look at some open town meeting language, or matters that don't necessarily concern specifically the representative town meeting. So we just wanted to introduce these to you. You'll see these also as we go along. It sounds like you have a question.
Could you please read the names and then leave the
Oh.
ideas?
Absolutely, sure. I'll read the names. Also, we have a link. When you get this presentation after this meeting, there's a link to the charter. We're actually going to pull together, you don't have to read all
This was actually
5,
in the email I sent to them as well.
right?
Yeah, we-
Oh, that's right. This one you already have. Okay, this one, okay, so we're not expecting you to read and memorize 5 charters and the bylaw. We will be bringing you language and pulling things together in a more digestible form. But, and we will also, in talking to the chair, we're also going to pick out just a couple of charters to give you as good examples of what a modern charter looks like, rather than looking at all of them. We can tell you in advance, we don't think there are any perfect charters, so just because we give you a couple of charters to look at to get a general idea of the outline of a charter, that doesn't mean that we approve the message of every single one of those charters.
So Myrna, in answer to your question, is Dedham?
Oh, I got it. And applications.
Yeah, that's great. I can read them also. It's Dedham, which we also noted has a town manager because that's going to feature into at least what it's called a town manager. And we talked about it kind of a flexible term. Dedham with a town manager form, Milford, town administrator, Milton has a town administrator, Reading has a town manager, Walpole has a town administrator, and Winchester has a town manager. So we're going to be looking at some of these towns, we'll be seeing them again. But we just wanted to key in on some of the reasons we've chosen these particular towns. But were there any other questions?
I think an interesting thought might be also like how long they've had either the town administrator or town manager. I kind of understand too, were any of these like recent changes or have these been in place for a while?
Absolutely, we can look at that. And we can also tell you that there has been a trend and there's some legislation for not these particular towns, but there is always legislation pending. So these charters are going to be a snapshot. They're not necessarily going to show all of the attempts to make changes, but that's a good point to explore how long they have that. The general trend has been to be moving to more professionalized and centralized forms of government. But that's not necessarily the case, and every town is moving at its own.
I want to ask you a question about that. So you say professionalized, because I look at, my experience is very limited to 2 towns in Massachusetts, but I would say that they had very professional leadership, but they call them different things. So, you know, the
Absolutely.
professionalism, you know, and they had a pretty broad span of control, people reporting into them, authority to make decisions within certain confines. So, you know, whether it's a town administrator and you call them town administrator, town manager, I think you say before, because some of them call them town executive and some of them call them, you know, it's almost like a COO. It's like, you know, so there are like all kinds of different names around it. So the name doesn't really carry any indication of one's more high level or professional than another. Is just title. Is that a correct assumption?
Absolutely. There are other titles, executive secretary, like you said, but the word professionalism, what I mean by that is that having someone, there tends to be a movement of some of the functions of boards and committees, volunteers to the exec. That's what I mean by professional, as opposed to that the town, I wouldn't say the town administrator or town manager, when you compare the two, one is not more.
So when you, and let's see further clarification on that. So do we mean things like having a planning director and a conservation administrator and sort of heads of those departments to complement the work or implement the work that the boards are doing?
Exactly.
Rather than just having all volunteers.
Rather than having all volunteers, kind of a move to having some staff positions to provide some of that support.
Which Burlington has done a lot of in the last, let's say, 20 years or maybe more. I'm trying to think of like when everybody, when all the departments, especially pretty much they all have. a department leader, right? Like a director of.
Conservation.
Yeah, okay, all right, just to set the stage for those who are.
Yeah.
There are still, there are still towns that don't have administrators or town managers, and they have, executive administrators who are helping the select board with items, but have a little bit less authority than a town manager or a town administrator.
Yeah.
Some select boards are still doing.
And I think, for our purposes, we've already kind of gone there, so we've kind of morphed there, so we're probably not gonna be looking back, we're just gonna be looking forward. So walking into this project, we're assuming we have a professionalized staff in pretty much all of the areas, and if there are any that are not at the moment, but we might wanna look at that, but at the moment, we have professionalized staff reporting into either a board or the town administrator. It's, it's like,
Because all the folks reporting into town to moderator are all volunteers, right?
Yes.
Nothing, the only thing I would just add on just the list of, towns and charters is, I guess I wouldn't group them into saying that they're good ones or bad ones. There are, we're gonna tell you as we go to best practices, trends of the state, but communities will structure their charters in ways that are like their distinct character, history, how that they are. So we definitely encourage you to see the charter that share. Like to the extent Judy did something that says that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that, Chris, it's not in any of those. I'm sorry. The road. Makes sense.
but these are our benchmark communities.
But all I'm saying is that, communities are sort of unique like things. They've got, there's some general categories of things that then, but, something maybe unique to Burlington that you want that may not be
Right.
which is, yeah.
Okay.
So, is the other presentation?
So you're gonna have to stop sharing and share the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Stop here?
Well, you can also click the tiny little button next to Microsoft Edge. Yeah.
That one?
Yeah. And then choose share something else. At the top. And then you can choose.
Great, thank you.
And then
You're not gonna vote.
Yeah, then you want to choose the other one. So go all the way on the bottom to the PowerPoint icon. On the black button.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, right here.
Thank you.
And then she get it.
Great. Right. So
Full screen.
Yeah.
Full screen.
I think you just have to, just slideshow. Yep. Increase timing. So what we thought we would do today is to give you an overview of some of the parts of Burlington today. But we're gonna start large with forms of government and then narrow it down so that all of you can kind of come along with us and understand where Burlington fits in the scheme of local governments in Massachusetts. So we'll talk for a minute about basic forms of government in Massachusetts. Really, in Massachusetts, we have two major forms, towns or cities. Towns, there are 260 open town meetings and only 32 representative town meetings. As far as cities go, the two forms of city government are council mayor or council manager. And on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit. The difference between towns and cities rests largely on the legislative branch. And that is that town forms of government consist of the legislative branch made up of either representative or open town meetings and an elected executive branch, which is the select. City forms of governments consist of an elected legislative branch of a council, and an executive branch is led by either an elected mayor or an appointed manager. Much of the choice of whether to, and let me start out by saying, this particular committee, we're not talking about at this point, we're not talking about becoming a city. I just want you to understand where representative town meeting fits in the grand scheme of Massachusetts cities and towns. Because, as we mentioned, it will largely rest on the legislative branch. You have a representative form of town meeting. And many of these choices are already made by the size of the city or town. Municipalities with fewer than 12,000 residents are not permitted to have a city form of government. They probably reach the bar of 12,000 to be a city. And municipalities with fewer than 6,000 residents must have an open town meeting. So all towns in Massachusetts with fewer than 6,000 residents have an open town meeting. So this chart just gives you a breakdown, just showing you that about 79, I think, or actually 74% have an open town meeting, but that doesn't, and those towns may be limited in their size, and they can't change their representative town meeting. This slide only represents that it does not, even though most of the communities in Massachusetts are open town meeting, the orange shows where most of the population of Massachusetts is living. And most people in Massachusetts are living under mayor's council, cities or. So there are some areas of confusion when you're talking about city or town. Cities can keep the title of towns even though they've adopted the city form of government. So, for example, you might call it the town of Amherst, but it is actually a council form of government considered a city under state law. But cities are allowed to keep that town designation. Some cities use the term mayor for what is actually the president of the city council. So when you're looking at mayor forms of government versus manager forms of government, in some cases, what they're calling mayor is not the chief executive, but rather the president of the legislature. Also, population doesn't necessarily determine form of government. There are cities as small as 12,000 and towns as large as 63,000. So we'll talk about where Burlington. Burlington, in general, representative town meetings all share certain characteristics. They're required by law to meet at least once a year, usually occurs more frequently. There's usually between 100 and 250 members, but the real range is much broader. There's few as 55 and the largest is more than 400. I think they're 429 right now. So, that's exactly.
Yeah, imagine.
We'll stay here, thank you.
As most of the people in this room know, representative town meeting is run by an elected moderator. And the warrant for town meeting is prepared by the select board, although there are resident mechanisms for residents to petition to add items. So in all towns with a representative town meeting, There is generally an advisory committee called either finance or advisory or ways and means committee that advises representative town meeting on the budget and on some other matters. Depending on the local government, some are solely allowed to give opinions on financial matters, and some are allowed to also give opinions on matters that aren't necessarily financial, but other items on the warrant as well. And finally, the select boards in Massachusetts, representative town meeting, forms of government. Historically, they were called the Board of Selectmen, but they are the head of the executive branch of the town. So they consist of 3 or 5 members. They're generally elected for 3-year terms. And the select board usually appoints a town administrator or a town manager or an executive secretary or one of these other titles to manage the day-to-day operations of the town while the select board maintains the policy directions.
Is that, I was reading something, so I'm not sure where it is, but it's, the select board appoints a town administrator to manage the operations of which, under which, that fall underneath their purview, because not everything falls underneath the purview, right?
Exactly, depending on the structure of the town.
So
So,
for Burlington,
exactly. So, we'll talk a little bit about what Burlington today looks like, now that we have kind of a little framework of what representative town meeting looks like. Burlington adopted representative town meeting in 1971. And just back up, I know that you were sent a bunch of that special acts, and we don't expect you to have memorized all of them. We just think they'll be helpful for you to have on hand if you're interested in looking at them at presentation or later.
just a comment about those. They kind of scared me when I saw the email, and then I clicked on the first one and I realized it's only a paragraph. So each one is not necessarily long, so don't let the volume of links frighten you.
And if you want the amended 686, it's on the town website. Town meeting. Page, I believe.
On through 2024.
Right, the column that will have all the amendments already in it.
And we'll talk about that. It's also, there's a list of the general bylaws. The most recent version does have a chart at the end of it based on the days. But they're not easy to find in general for a layperson. So we've organized them, and Anthony's going to be talking a little bit about the cap that your special acts have taken all the time. So since 2011, Burlington has elected.
Since from district, 6 precincts when we started, let's get this.
We had districts till 1993. Districts were abolished. So every town meeting member wants to run for election. We went from districts to precincts. Precincts have an official designation under the state law. So we had to go from districts which didn't to precincts which are based on equal population per precinct. So when we did that, all the districts disappeared. So nobody was an incumbent. Everybody had to run again. And the top 6 got a 3-year term, the next 6 got a 2-year term. I had only been a town meeting member for a year, so I got a 1-year. It's the bottom again.
I think it's not good yet. Okay.
We are lucky to have you here. And so you'll note since 2011, Burlington has 126 town meeting members from 7 precincts for 3-year terms. And you will notice in many towns with representative, the year after a census is often when there needs to be a change. If the census numbers are about the same as they were, there is not necessarily a need to change precincts and move things around and re-elect. So sometimes changes are made after the census, and I don't believe any changes had to be made. And, there might have been,
Yeah, they redrew the maps. which were-
well, they redrew the maps, but they didn't have to change the number of elected meeting members.
Yeah.
They just had to redraw the map so that there would be equal population.
So I think, I'm hearing it right, a precinct is legally defined through the state as saying it's gotta have equal population. So after a census, we realign the precinct. Who does that realignment? Who or what body executes that?
Well, you want to work on it, but
You don't have to go too deep either. Just
So we're gonna
give it a rough.
Is it-
it is usually the town and the clerk, and there might be someone assigned to it in each town, so I'm not sure if it is here, but it's probably the clerk. But it has to be approved by the state, so they're not acting on everything.
We should know that. I'm sure it's the town clerk because it's, okay, okay. That's her.
Thank you.
But there's state oversight.
Yeah, gotcha. That's the part I was listening for.
So. Town meetings presided over by the town moderator, who is elected annually in Burlington. The town moderator only votes in the case of a tie, I could be ever voted.
And has it always been an annual term?
It always has to be built in by law, it can be 1 year, the other 3 years.
Oh, I was gonna ask that question. So it can be three. I
It
tried.
can be 2. Thank you, Glenn, I appreciate it.
I'd like to put that on the list of things that I'd like us to talk about and maybe recommend extending to 3.
Trying to change it.
That would be,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
the charter,
While we're talking about it, I just want to capture the sentiment.
it's in the special act, so it would require an act.
Sorry, another quick question. So part of this committee is to create the charter. There exists a government with all of its nuances and pros and cons that exist now, and there's a work to convert that into, let's say, a easily digestible, more easily digestible, readable charter. There is also the charge to make potential alterations. Is there, it sounds like, I think from earlier discussions, this is sort of a process doing this together at once.
Yes.
Is it important for us at least, especially as we think of communication, to make sure we're calling out things that are changes from existing structure?
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely, and that will be part of the final report. You'll put things in the charter. When we have the charter format, that will be part of the recommendation.
And we also, just to add to that, there will be things that we're gonna say we want to put into the charter for whatever the reasons it belongs there, but there are some things we're not gonna want in the charter, but we may want to make recommendations for change, which might be a change in the bylaw. We also will be recommending that as well. So, at least that's our intent. Yeah, our intent is not to say, and when we're done, we want 2 more committees formed. No, we want to make sure that we're really in it, right? We're going deep into it. So while we're deep into it, if there are things that we think are important to recommend as bylaw change, we want to capture that and we'll make a decision how we proceed with that, but we're not going to defer it.
And we'll have guidance from the Collins Center to determine what's a thing that should go in the charter and what's a thing that should go in the bylaw.
Exactly.
My interpretation of hearing that before was that the charter is a constitution and the bylaw is, lower level interpretations, if that's the way you think about it. So I'm still thinking about the difference between capturing, organizing versus making change. Because we can make a lot of changes if through our wisdom to say, oh, we want to change all these things that maybe the public or the rest of the town would not be interested in. And then we sort of wasted a lot of time because we didn't even end up with a charter they won't agree with, right? So that's the thing I'm trying to pay attention to be wary of doing too much while just aggregating information and organizing versus the things that we do think are worth altering during that period.
Well, just to, not to be that clear, but sort of, if you look at the work plan that we provided, it was 2 points for public input. And those are actually strategic places that the committee really should learn about these things and then make, at least what I would call it, sort of lean in a direction. So I'm moving in a direction of so that it's specifically you can identify and make sure that what's changing. But you can go to those public input sessions. You're asking them counter and respond to, tell you how to feel about these changes. And, it looks like a linear process there. Go back, use that public input. If you don't want to put forward legislative language, that will might be slightly low. Some of that is sort of excluded. Some of it really is important without hearing the criticism and responding to the board. Part of it is saying, I think this is valuable, but we're not the right community for this. So what so thank you.
And I would actually comment to that. I think, that's why when the committee was formed, there's such a variety of backgrounds and understandings and experience in town government, because we want to have that variety of thought of at least give initial reaction. And then I would say, as we go through these things too, and there are things that you're like, okay, this is interesting, let's flag this, but I think we need public perception. Let's put a star on that, because then that's, with the external communications or the public input, we can make sure that's something that we figure out how to word so that we get either input from boards, committees, our employees, and then also the public. Because we as a group could have a collective thought, but it'll be really important to also get ultimately the larger societal input.
I understand. Something we may not necessarily change how some board committees form, we just may change the location of how it's done from. Not actually changing the process.
Right. In many cases, it will be outlining a lot of your bylaws, most of your bylaws will stay intact. And borrow some language from bylaws in the charter. But the idea is to have, if you think of it as, the charter is the tree and the bylaw are the leaves on the tree. We're going to put the broad strokes in a charter and a bylaw.
So something could end up being, oh,
No,
Hopefully not.
it's either with the charter or
If it's working provision, if you write the charter, it's a lead provision of the bylaw. There's a process that we're gonna actually lay out in the charter and public transition last in this process, which would form again, this is assuming that there are some changes that. But usually it's the select board to say, over the 7 months or a year, to review the bylaws and excise any, and excise any.
so post our committee, there can also be an extension of a group who, once things go through town meeting and things go through select board, are then going back and do.
if I'm changing the process, we just move the language from the charter to give it each.
Organization.
To have one document that codifies the entire government.
It's the actual document, you're giving them the ability to change cells in
Which is, yes,
requiring a petition to the state government.
which is, again, that's one of the determinants about whether it goes in the charter or we leave it in the bylaw. There are some things we are going to leave as bylaw because we want to have the ability to change it without having to go through all of that. But there are other things that are pretty straightforward that could go into the charter. That there are things that are fine being kind of more rigid in terms of.
Like having a representative town meeting, that's not gonna change, we're not gonna try to change that as long as we're not gonna try to change
Right,
that.
exactly. That we're a town and there were a town.
That we're like, those are the types of things you would put in a charter versus the details of how many people are elected per precinct. Then those would be like, I don't know.
That would be in the charter.
That would be the charter. Well, I don't have an example.
But I think the important thing here, and this is something that I've heard outside of here too, is that not everything is going into the charter because there are some things that we're not gonna wanna have to go to the state for every time we might want to make a change. And that's part of the discussion that we all are gonna have about whether something belongs on each specific issue as we go through it. Does this belong in a charter or not? And I suspect we'll have some very interesting discussions about it based on our perspectives. And obviously, and have been through this along, a number of times. And they'll help us see through things about that we may not see given we're very focused on Berlin. So they may broaden our horizons and help us see things we might not normally. But to your point, Jack, everything's not going in a charter.
Well, if we're thinking that putting it in the charter makes it especially as an easy for people to find, we can still structure and put together a document which likes various bylaws on the website, so people still find everything in one place without having to undo all the bylaws. We're not going to put it in the charter.
Sure, I mean, that was done in the email that we got from y'all today, right? The list of all the links to the bylaws.
But the way to make it easy for people to find.
It'll make it more easier for people to digest and understand.
Yeah, because it's written in understandable language. It's not clicking on a bunch of clicks because there are people who can't click on clicks, Thank you. But, so what we're trying to do is we're trying to, where it makes sense, to have our stuff in the charter, we're going to put it there, because for the townspeople, it will be easier for them to understand how we work.
So, bylaws really aren't the only things that structure. Now, there are layers. As we're going to sort of see later on in the presentation, actually, for now, you've got your bylaws, you've got your special acts, which are passed by legislation. You can't have representative without a special act. So you already do have a sort of, you have a relatively long list of them. And then you've got sort of state law where it sort of governs other aspects. One of the things that we use in the charter movie is sort of consolidating it as a power of state law, but it's drafted locally. But the other thing is, the best example I can really think of is your town manager / administrator. What we find that you put even when you're in transition of looking for a town administrator, they're looking for extra special act or extra charter, because they know that the charter will change on the minutes of the year, like every year. Has to go through that process.
And that's when you're in the hiring process, the town manager, they know what they're doing.
Exactly, they don't know what they're, so I'm saying that, now there's more to the charter than the time, just as an example, that's what, they know that can't change. With the process of this. So the three pillars, one is we call transparency, that you can look at everything. You say, I'm using the law, durability can't be changed, which is a bylaw, it can change. The third one that's still in my mind right now.
So I think maybe, unless there's I want to move us along a little bit on this, but I think probably as we go through this, I think part of this is we have to actually get into it, and so we can actually experience what you guys are talking about. At this point, it's kind of like theory, but once we get our hands dirty and start getting into this, we have real life examples like this particular issue, I don't think should be in a charter. I think it should be in a bylaw because blah, blah, blah. Then I think they really understand how that'll all play out. So I propose that we kind of move on this discussion and move on to the next thing. And then if it's not clear after we start getting into it in a nitty-gritty way, then let's raise it up again. But for now, let's move on if that's okay with you.
Okay, so I thought of the other term is clarity. The charter does provide, much of your language may be 16 years old, and the language that's in use in the phraseology is unclear. And the language that we would put in the charter would be more modern language that would look like be a little easier for people to understand. Okay, just right, just quickly, Burlington, as you all know, probably, they have 3 town meetings scheduled per year. In January, May, and September. It's fairly unusual for a representative town meeting. Many just have 1 or 2 scheduled, or I will say town meeting in general. And, but it allows for, it allows for a quicker response. Have 3 already scheduled instead of having so many special meetings. So for example, additional special meetings can be called if petitioned by 200 voters or on the request of the select board, town moderator, or 10 meeting members. So, but when those meetings are called, there are very strict time limits where they have to occur, where you have a more predictable schedule, people can, rise to meet those meetings, rather than trying to. Just for your information, you want to understand the difference between legislature and executive. As a legislative body, town meetings duty include passing the town budget, and among other duties, authorizing the issuance of debt, approving local bylaws that are proposed in zone of public safety wetlands, although often proposed by local boards and committees, approving expenditures for certain projects, approving transferring funds from one place to another. The town moderator in Burlington appoints, and you can tell me if this is no longer the case, is that some of these committees, this is what's in the bylaws, some of these committees may not have met in a while, but the town moderator it appoints Ways and Means, Capital Budget Committee, General Bylaw Review, Town Facilities, Rules Committee, Land Use Committee, Human Services Advisory Committee, and Zoning Bylaw Review Committee. This is according to your bylaws. There may be other ad hoc committees that are as well. The select board in your form of government, the chief executive body in Burlington. You have 5 select board members with 3-year terms. Select board meets about twice a month. The select board's job, among many of their duties, is to prepare the warrant for town meeting, call elections, appointing certain boards and committees, usually through the town administrator. Formal responsibilities, there are additional many responsibilities set out by Mass General Law, special acts in the town's bylaws. For example, process licenses, the Board of Public Works, they act with the Board of Public Works in Burlington, etc. The select board also sets policy and provides overall strategic planning for the town. The select board, according to your special act, the select board appointments include the town administrator, town council, and the town accountant. Your bylaws are a little bit unclear, and so we're definitely going to be investigating. Some of the bylaws talk about there may be some inconsistency between the town administrator special act and the bylaws regarding the appointment of some positions, but it may just be old language that doesn't work in practice. There's a couple other positions that, while they technically say the select board appoints, the town special act what gives the town administrator appointment powers with the approval of the so it's a fine line, but we will be pushing a little bit on that language.
Where's the I thought the treasurer was also appointed by the select board. Is that not part of what?
Well,
It's under town council.
Oh, treasurer falls under.
So the town accountant appoints with approval by the select board.
Town accountant needs the treasurer?
Well, actually, no, I'm wrong.
Yeah, they're separate.
Well, treasurer tax collector.
Yeah, the treasurer tax collector is a select board appointee. But it's not on the list, so.
well, I'll just, the right, since it happens, she's saying it, I think, in the nicest way possible. So the special act, you have a town administrator position was created, special act, which we'll get to later. The special act created back in 1978 actually created a fairly powerful town administrator position, which under the act, the town administrator is entitled to appoint all positions that are formally appointed by the select board. So your bylaws reflect something different. And again, technically, the special act is controlled. So we're not here to sort of call anything out, but you know, one of the sort of, I won't say it's a unique situation, but you know, it's the type of situation you get into. So these you know, like piece of legislation is that you may be currently doing something that isn't consistent. Yeah, consistent with the control of special act.
So, okay, so our treasurer, for example, used to be elected. And then we just recently switched it to appointed. Recently being.
Yeah, last summer,
Huh?
wasn't it in response to the last government meeting?
No,
No,
it was. It was right, it was, that was one of their recommendations, but, so at that time, when they did that, was there a special act that had to be done in order for that to occur, and did that just not get updated?
Well, well, we have to figure that out. I would say the reason we put these here is because these are confirmed, we look at all the special acts. These are confirmed that these are the ones that absolutely have to be appointed by the select board. So there's the reason that the ones you're drafting are on here is because there's a lack of, there's some ambiguity that we'll dig into as we move this process about which you make it small.
Okay.
That's all that this is. So,
And it may be that there's, you know, and your town attorneys may have looked into it as well, so we will work with them. But it may be that the language of the special act just meant officers at that time, and this was changed to appointed, you know, it's not covered by the special act, but what we're saying is there's different pieces of legislation. One of the benefits of going through this process is iron.
And that would be a good example of why we need to go through this process to identify something like that. Yes, that's okay.
So the town administrator is appointed by the select board and is subject to the policy, authority, and direction of the select board. Some of the duties of the town administrator, they're responsible for daily administration of town affairs. They supervise and direct officers under the purview of the select board. They administer resources. They're the budget for departments under the select board, attend select board meetings and town meetings, negotiates contracts, maintains and reports on the town financial status. These are not all of the duties, we listed a few out there. Appoint certain officers and employees, with some of them confirmed by the select board, and any other duties and responsibilities that the select board and the executive town meeting doesn't choose the town. Just for your information, we're going to be talking about some appointed and elected officials. Appointed boards and committees, the bylaws include the following: Conservation, Historical, Town Beautification Committee, Information System Security Advisory Committee, Burlington Housing Partnership. What we're going to talk about, what would go into a charter, if not all the details of these appointed boards and committees. Generally, what goes into the charter is an understanding of what the appointment process is, who's doing the appointment. So we may be talking.
Just for people, because this was a term that I wasn't familiar with, just for people who are new to this, is that appointed means they're hired, as opposed to elected, which means they're on the ballot. So I didn't get that. It's like, yeah.
Well, in some circumstances,
Hired,
right?
meaning you got paid. Because
Hired means like you get recruited and you get
Okay,
hired.
got it.
Because you're not
Enough to
elected.
do that.
Some elected positions do get some money, so.
And some appointed, like, so appointed, like, boards are volunteers, yes. But appointed treasurer collector is an employee of the town with salary, yes. So you can be elected and get paid or not, you can be appointed and get paid or not.
Yeah.
There is money.
And I did copy that. We're all employees of the town for lots of rules and laws that we have to
I'm just,
Sorry.
I just, so these are the appointed boards. These are the non-employee boards.
These are volunteer appointed boards, that are in your bylaws,
Have you looked at this?
that report to the
To the
select.
select board.
As opposed to, that are appointed by,
I asked a question and I don't want to get too detailed, but are there other boards that are provisioned for that are not here? Because I'm thinking about like council on aging, board of directors, I'm thinking about Burlington Youth and Family Services. Which are not moderator appointed, and actually, they're select board appointed. Yeah, okay. So where would they be?
We probably need to have them, when we go through this, put those on the list, right?
There's a whole slew.
so for the purposes of the charter, generally all of the appointed or what we say selected, not elected boards are not generally listed in the charter. There are ad hoc ones, there are ones that come and go, there are boards that just pull together like this committee for a certain purpose.
But if it's a permanent board, it should be in there.
Well, we can talk about it more. In general, we recommend, we put the elected board into the charter because the elected part, is subject to, mass general law. Many of the appointed ones, like, conservation, their makeups and their duties, many of them are already covered by state law. So, we generally do not put that in the charter. But elected ones for sure will be, and we'll talk about in the charter, how some of these other boards are appointed, the appointment process. And we may also have a section of the charter where we talk about simple things like what must all multiple member bodies do, such as, appoint chair, minutes, et cetera. There might be a place where we talk about general.
We'll talk about those details of what boards are where when we get to these.
And some of the charters you'll see, some may have some of these boards listed. I think the modern school of thought is not to list the appointed boards, but we can definitely talk more about that as we get to that second.
On the website, there's a list of all the appointed committees, the 6 pages.
One
Yeah.
just
Do we have the sunset in?
Probably not.
Yeah, I think we'll get into the discussion and to me, it's an issue, what's a permanent board versus an ad hoc board? And that is the discussion I think that we should get into when we get to it.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about things like sometimes the number on the board will change, which is why you want to keep that out of the charter. We may have some people have a, 13-member historical commission, but they can only find 7 people, so they change the size of the board. So they can do that very easily in the bylaws, not so easily in the charter.
one thing that I said was popping up in board charters is a provision in the section that I was just talking about, which talks about a periodic review of boards and committees to sort of make sure that sort of boards that are being populated on regularly. Again, this is if you try to list all the boards in the charter, you might have 6 pages that would be defunct within 2 years. So
Okay.
We'll definitely talk more about this. We'll talk a second. Nope, this is good. Great. We included on here elected officials. Other than, we've already talked about the select board and town meeting members, moderator, other elected officials are the town clerk, assessors, school committee, library trustees, planning board, board of health, constables, Burlington Housing Authority, which I think defined board under statute, and recreation commission and the Shawshing Valley Technical School District. These are your elected officials. Elected officials will be in the charter, should be in the charter, and to make changes to elected boards require the special act anyway, so they definitely would need to be in there. They're not making it more difficult to change things because elected officials.
The recreation, change 3 members, from that to be 5.
Right, I'm talking about elected officials, but yes, this is not, there are some others. For example, there are some alternate members that I didn't list. But this is where, this is what is in your bylaws, but we will definitely, go through and talk about these. And for something like that, where they're elected and a couple of appointed, that may be pushed out.
Question. Does it say, as the example Jack just said, with the rec commission and 3 members, yet there's a member of the school committee who sits on, does it say, how they're appointed or which board they have? Is that,
It can be very specific about where, or it can say there are, 3 elected members and, or they may be appointed by so-and-so. You can be vague about it, or you can be very specific, depending on, have that conversation. Depending on, I think we start with what historically has been done, and is that, if that's still, if it ain't broke, we'll put it in there, and, or if there's, if you need more flexibility, we might give a little. Okay, so I'm gonna let Anthony take it from here. But it's going to talk a little bit. Let me just, we had a few questions. Let me just assure you that we were going to be going into all of this in more detail. And the purpose today is to give you a framework for those of you who maybe don't understand some of the differences between elected and appointed boards. To give you this framework, we'll give you this to take a look at again. You want to go through it on your own time. It's a general framework of how government works in Burlington, but it is not the last time they did it. I mean,
So I think we talked about this. I think that's a good presentation on this, the last meeting between special acts and state law and bylaws. But essentially, special acts are they're created in whatever town they generate from. But once you get passed by the legislature, they have the force of state law when applied to your specific town. That's why they're called special acts. So rather than a general law that applies to everyone in every Commonwealth, a special act applies strictly to the jurisdiction. Has to get in special act also. Yeah, effective. I won't go too deep into the details, but most charters are created through the special act process, so it's in the modern time. There's going to be processed last meeting, but you're all kind of on a special act. Why are we talking about it right here? So your current form of government was created and modified in pieces through a variety of special acts. So you've got a special act which defines the representative committee. You've got a special act that defines your administrator. You've got some other. The only special acts listed here are the ones that relate to the form of the government, structure of government. Many more special acts than the ones that are listed on the slide. See that slide. Yeah, so one of the reasons that we put this together was at the last meeting, there were many members of the group that said they sort of wanted to see things listed out. So as we may have really started sort of holistically. So we sort of split the difference. We sort of organized the special acts into the various sections that they would appear in. And we sent the actual language to you earlier today. But right now, your special acts cover these 4 categories that are sort of seen in modern charters. They don't necessarily appear like that in different special acts. So, for example, incident relief and general provision sections often occur with language that would be in Article 2 of the legislative section. Just to be clear, your charter that you create doesn't necessarily have to follow the same structure recommended, but it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to have all of the same articles. It's one of the things differently. But these are the types of articles commonly say, and again, we structured the various special acts into those sections. By far, your biggest and most complicated one is around the legislative branch. This community adopted the representative town meeting back in 1970. as Pat alluded to, during her comments, started with 180 members, from the 12 districts, and we had that district conversation. I'll just warn you right now, there are 4 slides in the legislative branch. I won't go through every different aspect of the special act, but I just want you to say that as you read through this, if you read one special act, you're gonna have to read the one that came before to know what the modified. That's one of the reasons why it's relatively confusing. And then the other thing sort of about it is that, you know, towns are kind of living organisms. So different special acts are sort of drafted, only some of them are good about referencing which special act would change. So if you look at the seven essentially in the language, you see that sometimes they're very good about saying this is a modification to chapter 686 of the Acts 1570. Some of them are not as good as saying that. Now, as we go through this quickly, I'm just going to say the general trend, there's some trends particularly around the legislative branch. One was around increasing the number of members, not increasing, but change, obviously, making the districts more consistent. And the terms are pretty much stayed the same. And one thing that's sort of more technical that may not matter to to citizen is that technically your representative town meeting is always in session with sort of designated breaks over time. So when it first started, the break period, the time that the town meeting was adjourned, was 3 months, and over time you've expanded that. So that is sort of what's happening. Just that'll be the general trend. I'm going to go through these sort of related to 150 days. Yeah. So I'm just looking at it's 120
days.
Yeah, it's 120 days on the slide, but as you go through this, I'm saying it's the terms that make the adjournment period longer and longer. Yeah, I think you're right. It's not. I'm saying it's the terms that it's longer and longer for it to be adjourned and adjourned. So again, that's it. So first period in 1970, your first change was relatively soon. 5 years later, to lengthen the period of adjournment. And again, so you sort of got several changes. So most of the changes are reflective of changes to the population. I've been trying to move that this whole time.
Somebody moved it.
He finally got it.
Changes to the number of town meeting members that come from each district, as well as this is in sort of, and it actually said sort of last year, allowing the town meeting to adjourn for 150 days in 1999. And one of the important things has also been how they deal with vacancies. So those have been some of the major changes. The size of the town meeting, how many people come from each district or precinct, and how we deal with vacancies. A lot of that has been driven by the change in population.
Can I ask you a quick question? Is 1986 where we changed from districts to precincts, and 1993 where we upped it to 7 from 6? You know,
I have to look at language.
93 is when we changed from district to precinct.
oh, okay, all right.
All right, so yeah, so more changes. So previously, you had some people that were excluded from being able to serve as town meeting members. So you expanded, I guess, the pool of people that can potentially serve. Again, some other sort of modifications to the structure of the districts. So again, most of it I think has been driven by sort of the change in population. I think this is the last slide of this. Again, changing the number of town meeting members per district, and again, expanding that town meeting members can be more involved in the government than before. They were restricted. You served, you work for the town, you can be a town meeting member in certain other positions or other positions. So there's been basically an expansion of the size of the town meeting, loosening certain restrictions. Sorry.
No, I just, that was getting at, so you could have teachers and police and all that kind of stuff, you know, maybe.
Police and fire.
Oh, I see that there's somebody here. So some other things, actually, this 2022 one, you guys may remember this relatively recently. These actually all, in some form, actually cover some open vacancies. This one has to be tie an election. So as you all know, for a town meeting member vote, you're getting a lot of people from each different district. So special election paid to, how do we pay them ties for certain, for certain elections? So the next one, which is actually relatively interesting, is the executive branch. So this was a relatively short one, changing the select mid to select board. That's really the only change on the tier select board. And then the town administrator act adopted in 1978. Again, like I said, sort of, that was interesting is that this act, which actually has not been modified, states that the town administrator has the authority to appoint or remove any of the positions that were previously appointed by the select board. That's, you know, previously 1978. So for all intents and purposes, as of that date, the town administrator was overall with the appointing authority of the select board. Now, that doesn't mean that they're totally centralized, because I think under some of your elected boards at least have some appointing authority for their employees.
Right, the select board does not, the key words there are previously appointed by the select board, because they only oversee certain parts, and then there are independent boards that do not report to the select board.
And again, not saying that this is something that you would do, but there's a relatively strong trend across the state to have more employees come under the ambit of the town administrator / manager. Not most, but I'd say there's a significant trend of communities wanting to make elected boards consider a sort of high level policy making position, and then the day-to-day to city staff, or also town staff, the town administrator / all communities are doing that. Some of that's just not in it, but I would say more than not, when communities are looking at this, they're going to have more centralized to make sure.
So that would mean like, planning director. We have the board of select. Question was, it's not that.
We
No
all
longer,
by the time.
it would no longer be hired by the board of health, it would be hired by the select.
But they would, no, not by the board of selectmen, by the town administrator, it's different. Right, but it's different. Their supervision would be by their board. So you're talking about a dot, like a matrix. Your HR policies, your work policies and all, compensation, all that. In those would be done by the COO, their chief, well, that person is. But their work direction and their priorities and all of that are done by the board. So they never would report to the select board. I think it's a really important difference. They would not report to the select board in that scenario. They would still report into the Board of Health, the planning board, or whatever. So I think this is an area that we're gonna have to flesh out very, very carefully. If indeed we even want to go there, there may be some boards where it makes more sense to do that. Maybe other boards that it doesn't make some sense, but I suspect those structures are highly matrix, where people do get work direction from their boards, but their paychecks and performance review, that kind of stuff comes through the
Like
administrator.
the budget, so like, it's like planning director or
Health director.
health director, work under town administrator. Budget discussions would happen with them, right? Not necessarily, but obviously the input from the board.
Yeah, so the way it works in a lot of communities, and I sort of fall back to that straight from the cities, the way it mostly works in a community where all reports, report to the town or city manager, city administrator. But there are elected boards in those situations. The elected board is a policy created body, so they're thinking about for the planning, think about planning. They're not spending that much really any time on the budget. They could, in many ways, the regional planning or your city board, like the city manager. Have a discussion about things that they need for the department to properly planning is the one that might easiest to properly do studies, right? There's a proposal, provided that they're providing information to the board. With a license to, propose a change to, local. So it's definitely more collaborative, and the board is spending really any time thinking about. It could be, usually it's only a commission, they're really not spending that much time worried about the inner workings of the budget. Something, setting policy. Again, that's the way it's done in terms of all of those reports. City manager, manager. You know, there's a variety of how we structure those things. Some more subject, some appointments, but some not more they. It's something, so I'm not advocating my position.
Does it, the city manager,
That person to find himself in a conflict, it's always directing the conflict. You can go down.
No, I would say it's, but I've seen it's, you know, you, as a staff person, I actually see somebody get the same sort of. Yeah, they're not saying.
They were appointed or fired by the town manager who doesn't like what they're doing, but the direction of the elected board. If there is, that's why just put that employee in a very tough spot.
That's why we're gonna have to special this out.
Right.
yeah, and there may be some boards where that makes some sense. Because again, I think Burlington, this is where I think we've got some special, we've structured, and we have different committees have different responsibilities, maybe a little bit different than other communities, and we're gonna have to kind of figure that out. I do have one question. Does the town manager, town administrator always report to the board, select board?
Yes, I mean, if you got a town structure, yes. But the charter again delineates sort of their different areas of the board, but ultimately the town administrator manager. I'm gonna use the term town manager just for simplification. I'm just town administrator, that's but the town administrator is appointed by the select board, can be by the select board. So your current special act currently has a provision for removal of select board members, like 4 members of the select board. This is independent of their term of appointment. This is saying they've done something, or you know, you're not happy with the town administrator.
Performance issues.
Yeah, one thing that we don't necessarily advocate for is putting too much detail in here about sort of specifying how you determine that they were, they're not doing performance. What we do sort of a little, we see some charts for a little bit around, you get an 8, and then it's between the town administrator and the select board to determine how the use conducted.
Yeah.
But the chart says that you should be, it's possibly the select board, but they should be reviewing the person that have to be
Typically, they have a 3-year public contract. Fire. Years salary, but 3 years salary. So if and it's we have to discuss it. School department, but it's not managing. Huge discussion anytime. Yeah. So yes. A lot of details here that. Discussions.
You've already got your special act, you've already got, this is in place, so you've already got sort of I would say the roots of something to work with. Is, you know, as we discussed earlier, you could keep basically all of this and plug it into the calendar in its appropriate implementation.
And not change it.
Or, yeah, or you could, you know, we could say, you know, we've been dealing with something for however long, we want to make the tweak here, so that at least that concern addressed. Without you know, we do that process. So, so just to, I don't want to spend too much time. So there have been no modifications to this act, but again, select board can veto any of the town administrator appointments. The select board retains the special act retains the appointment power for the town council. Again, it provides a provision for removal of the administrator if they are not performing as required. Some quick ones that are actually sort of very good and relatively unique is there's a referendum provision for citizens to overturn a particular action of the representative town meeting. That's in 2007, so relatively recently, it actually, had no assistance. We've already talked about that, but there's pretty much a strong trend for communities wanting to provide some outlet mechanisms for citizens to, hold their, waste other than just elections. So that's where a lot of people are. You want to add anything?
No, I think you said it pretty much.
So we were ahead of our time, is that what you're saying on this one?
Yes.
Do you know how high the bar is for that?
We have to pull it out. It's pretty high.
It's very high.
Okay.
And then this is the last one. So these would go in what we would call your general provisions in a charter. So as sort of Pat alluded to earlier is, things around things that other boards can do, so boards can do employees and limitations on what positions like the positions. So I think that's yeah. So I think we'll turn it back to.
No, that's fine. We just want, that's the general overview. Just wanted to let you know where we're going. Our next steps are we are going to march through the different sections, highlight them, talk about them in detail. The first up will be the legislative branch. And hopefully get your input, look at some of these things, show you what things are looking like right now, showing you what potential language would be if you did things just as they are right now, and talking about areas that we may want to be. Some of the legislative branch, I think we talked about monitoring. There may be some other little tweaks that you decide as a group that you want to recommend some changes to. But as we go along, we'll be talking about these things in this order. But I just want to remind you, if we talk about town meeting for a couple of weeks and go to the next one, we're not done with town meeting. We are still continuing to get public input along the way at several points, and you will be revisiting those sections. What we will probably do is kind of reach a consensus of what issues do you want to move forward with, and along the way, and we'll move forward with those issues. We'll use some draft language. They'll say, okay, well, we're as far as we can go on this, we're going to go to the next article. And meanwhile, you'll be getting your stakeholder input and your public input. And you may find you get to the end of the process and you talk to everyone and they say, and you're really hearing people, you're saying, I'm not ready to make that change. Well, let's go back and fix that. So that what we present at the end is something that we feel is a strong charter or a strong recommendation to the bylaw. So that's where we're headed next, and that's all we have for tonight.
Any questions? Anybody have?
We'll get online.
I like.
Grandview guest.
The last review, not relevant to this, the last review committee, were there like regular updates to town meeting as the project went along, or there was just one presentation?
It was 6 months. It was only 6 months. It was a 6-month project. So I don't know, but I am planning to give an update at town meeting. I've been told that we will be giving an update to town meeting in September. So in September, no, an update. I mean, we met. Well, we'll decide what that looks like. That's probably external.
Well, yeah, I should talk about that in our.
Yes. External communications. But we, we'll do a briefing. I thought my, kind of my job would be to kind of do a quick update and we can decide what we want to update as we get a little bit closer. And I think the next meeting is really important, just for everybody. And I hope everybody can come because this is where we're actually going to dive in and actually find out what we kind of up here, this is like conceptual, everybody on the same page. Now we're all on the same page, hopefully, or close to it. Now we're going to dive in and start actually doing some of the work. And as Pat said, it's not forever, do it once and you're done, but I think we'll get a better idea what this is really about after we go through the process for the first time. So I think this is one of those, there are probably some really key meetings as we go along. I think the next one's going to be team meetings. We're all gonna learn together how to actually do this thing, and we'll get better at it as we go along. But this is gonna be important, so. Yeah, I will, and just so you know, we've been kind of targeting 2 hours for these meetings. I think that's not all people can actually handle. And so we're gonna try to keep to that. If something's important, we look at it, we feel that that's kind of what the plan has been. What is the day of your next meeting? Just the Tuesday, the
So do you?
second.
August 10th.
Yeah, August.
Are we here?
No. So
Oh, that's right.
It's the 12th, right?
this is 12, yes, that's 12. So we are here on the, as I understand it, we are in the main meeting room on the first Tuesday, and we're on this one for the fourth Tuesday until September, when they open up the annex, and then we'll be on the annex. So I will promise to tell you in the agenda where you're going. And I'll put it in red and bold, so you can see it.
Be ready, read the agenda.
What if you
Yeah, do we want to be in the annex?
I agree.
We have a choice, I do like the swim one.
Yeah, right, I'll make a note, Patrick.
I don't feel like I'm breathing.
Yeah, if you want this to be your meeting spot, it can be your meeting spot.
So let's, is everybody, everybody like this meeting room?
Yeah.
Okay. And BCAT, we can deal with that, Patrick?
Yes, they recorded tonight, and so we'll see everything how the recording comes out when it's posted. I'm sure it's going to be excellent, and everything will work out that way.
Okay, well, it seems like popular demand, this is the favorite place to be. Do we just want to be here all the time? Can we be here all the time?
Should be able to, yeah.
The only issue might be to have like a bunch of guests or something, and I don't know, but otherwise it should be fine.
I mean, it makes it easier if we always go to the same place. Right?
Yeah.
So if we could make this our home away from home, why don't we do it? And then if we have a special need for more room, we can deal with it when we get there. Okay, and just a reminder for the subcommittees, they'll get this together after this meeting, and I guess we need a motion to adjourn. So is there a second? Anybody against? All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Oh. We remember to bring them. They all take responsibility for
For the new things.
It's a big responsibility.
No way, I'm bringing.